Good morning, everyone. I just finished a very scrumptious breakfast, served to me in bed by my lovely pregnant wife and two wonderful children. And while this day of celebration is still in front of us, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to you about fatherhood. I'm going to tell you a story about my dad. You know who he is. Other than my wife, he's made more cameos in my videos than anybody else.
This is thunder. This is lightning. Don't get caught in a storm. All things work together for good for those who love the Bruins.
While I was growing up, even though we didn't really have very much money, my family managed to go on summer vacation just about every year. In the year of our Lord 1998, my dad, my mom, my sister Kyla, and myself hopped into our car and drove 2,200 kilometers down to Lake Havasu City, Arizona. While we were there, we visited the Grand Canyon, played a lot of Crazy Eights, and my dad and I hit up the resort's golf course. Now, before I continue with this story, there are a couple of things you need to understand. One is that my dad is a highly competitive person. When I was growing up, it wasn't a Robinson Family Games night if somebody didn't wind up crying. And the other thing is, I was 12 years old when we went on this trip. So my dad let me drive the golf cart for the first time. One of the games that we played that week was quite close. As a matter of fact, when we teed off on the 8th hole, we were tied. When we approached my dad's tee shot, I parked too close to the ball. He didn't have enough room for his backswing, so he told me to move the cart. Now, you got to realize I didn't have a lot of practice, so I wasn't comfortable going in reverse yet. So instead, I cranked the wheel all the way to the left and stepped on the gas. Again, I didn't have a lot of experience, so I may have stepped on the gas a tad bit too hard and did a complete 360, and suddenly there was my dad right in front of me. I can't emphasize this enough. I didn't have a lot of experience, so rather than hit the brake, I panicked and just yelled, "Dad!" And he turned and looked up at me from his backswing just in time for me to crash into him with the golf cart. As he stood there, clutching his back, I distinctly remember thinking, I need to just run him right over and finish what I started here, because he is gonna kill me. After a moment that seemed like forever, my dad turned and looked at me and said, "Boy, some guys will do anything to win a game." I really like telling this story, and not just because I did win the golf game. Only time I've ever beaten my dad, by the way. It's because this story perfectly illustrates the kind of guy that my dad is. Despite the fact that I'd completely broken his concentration and also put him in a tremendous amount of physical pain, he exercised such self-control and strength to not only just contain his anger and frustration, but go a step further and break the tension and ease my guilty conscience with a joke. I'm blessed to have such a great dad. I'm very aware of this because I feel that the single greatest issue facing our society today is broken relationships with fathers. So many of these initiatives that we're seeing today, the Me Too movement, the pink t-shirts for bullying, and those Gillette ads that you see on television, all of this is just a byproduct of generations of boys who have not been taught to respect women, to respect their peers, and to respect themselves. And it is heartbreaking to see all the collateral damage from this. But there's always hope. I want to give you an example that I think most of you will appreciate from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Just an FYI, there are some spoilers ahead. Over the course of the 22 film series, no single character comes remotely close to Tony Stark's nearly 5.5 hours of screen time. I think it's fair to say that he's our main protagonist, and even for stretches of time, an antagonist. When we're first introduced to Tony, he is a sarcastic, smooth-talking, hedonistic billionaire who unabashedly brags about his creative genius and womanizing ways. But this is all just a facade. Inside, he's an insecure little boy because he has serious doubts about what his now deceased father thought of him. When he's captured by terrorists, Tony is forced to begin facing who he really is. Watching Yinsen courageously sacrifice his own life to save Tony causes him to question his entire way of life and the empire he has built. Further complicating his inner turmoil is his realization that the man who he looks up to as a father figure, Obadiah Stane, has never cared about him at all and actually plotted to have him killed. Tony's internal struggle finally reaches a climax when he's confronted with his own mortality. Being poisoned by the very thing that is keeping him alive, Stark's only hope of survival is hidden in a box of his father's research. And buried in this research is a message from his dad, Howard.
This is the key to the future. I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one day you'll figure this out. And when you do, you will change the world. What is and always will be my greatest creation is you.
This saves Tony's life, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Hearing his father declare his love for him and belief in him affirms Tony's identity and strengthens him to move forward. Don't get me wrong, Tony has quite a few more bumps along the road, but it is this validation from his father that sets him on the path to become the ultimate hero of the Avengers. Speaking of heroes, dads, I want to encourage you to read this book. It's called Hero by Dr. Meg Meeker, and in it, she outlines just how vital your role is in your child's life, and she gives some excellent advice on how to meet their needs. There is so much truth and guidance in this book, and I believe you will benefit greatly from reading it. I sure have. So get your hands on a copy of this book and have a terrific Father's Day.